Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing a top 10. Topic of the top 10? Trios. This is inspired by AEW announcing they're going to have a Trios Championship, and that hasn't begun yet. The tournament hasn't begun yet as of the time of this taping. I believe it starts tonight. I'm recording this on a Wednesday. So this is my opinion of the top 10 trios in wrestling history. With that being said, let's jump right into it. Number 10, the Wyatt Family. Now, I know they eventually expanded, and a lot of these trios do expand to include other members. Wyatt's at some point had Braun Strowman and Daniel Bryan, and even Randy Orton for a small amount of time. But the original trio, Luke Harper, Eric Rowan, and Bray Wyatt, to me was a fantastic pairing. I loved everything about them. I thought they were something that could totally change what was going on in wrestling. Unfortunately, I don't ever think they were treated the way they should be, and they never got to where they should have in the WWE, which would have probably put them higher on the list. If we look back at the era of wrestling that the Wyatt families was involved in, they're going to be looked at as one of the most positive things on the show. For that reason, they're making this list. Now, number 9, from the early to mid-'80s in Jim Crockett Promotions, the Russians, Ivan and Nikita Koloff, and Crusher Khrushchev. Crusher Khrushchev would later go on to be Smash and Demolition. Ivan and Nikita, the Koloffs, they wrestled kind of like a Freebird style where they had any two of the three could be in the ring at the same time. They were U.S. Tag Team Champions, I'm pretty sure they were the first U.S. Tag Team Champions. Nikita Koloff, I believe, had the TV title during this time, too. They were just a force in Jim Crockett Promotions, and they were definitely one of the top heel teams, a great villain team for teams like the Rock and Roll Express to go up against, and Magnum TA to go up against, for Dusty Rhodes to go up against. In the height of, or towards the end of the Cold War even, having a team of Russians, just because they were Russian or Russian sympathizers in the case of Crusher Khrushchev, made them one of the mega heels in the company. For that, they made our number 9. Now our number 8, Team Extreme, Matt and Jeff Hardy, and Lita. You can't talk about the early Hardy Boys run without talking about Lita and just how innovative Lita was, not including what the Hardy Boys were doing. The Hardy Boys were doing stuff on a major stage that a lot of wrestling fans had never seen before. There was a heavy lucha influence, a heavy Japanese influence, what would go on to be known as the indie style of wrestling, a lot more high flying. A lot of what Rob Van Dam and Sabu were doing in ECW, they were bringing onto the main stage, and they were doing it at a high level. Multiple-time tag team champions. Lita was a women's champion during the run. Another one of the highlights of the early 2000s, late 90s of WWE television was Team Extreme. They are just so charismatic and they had such a resonance with the fans and such a connection to the fans that even to this day, all three of them are looked at as absolute legends in the wrestling industry. Hence why they made the list. Now our number 7, probably the most successful WWE tag team of all time, the New Day. And they won multiple tag championships. They've had 2 members that were world champions, albeit both of the world championship runs did not feel as special as they should have. Much like I said with the Wyatts, when we look back at this generation of WWE, the 2010s, 2020s, the New Day is going to be one of those things we look back as the highlights, whether it be Woods or Big E or Kofi. All three of them together, they're so charismatic. They still are. They're still going. They're so entertaining. Everything they did was made better by them, and they were the highlight of the show. I guarantee if we go 10 years, 15 years from now, or even 5 years from now, we're going to see a bunch of wrestling a bunch of wrestlers that say, when I first started watching wrestling, it's because when I was a kid, I seen the New Day, and I loved the New Day, so that made me want to be a wrestler. And that's the impact that they're going to have on the business. I think it's fantastic what they've done. I'm an absolute fan of them. I love the New Day. I can't wait to see Big E come back, even if he doesn't come back as a wrestler. I think he's got so much charisma and so much talent that any role they put him in, he's just going to excel at. Just a fantastic team, a fantastic group, hence why they made the list. Our number 6. The sometimes antagonist of the New Day, the Elite. The Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. History is going to look back at these three guys for being the innovators that they are. They took, again, much like what I said with the Hardys, they took that style and ran it up to a different level. Kenny Omega ran with a style that pretty much no one else in the world was doing at the time. I mean, others like Will Ospreay can do it, are doing it now. Kota Ibushi was doing it with him. Their impact inside the ring is half of the story, though. Their impact outside of the ring, whether it be a part of the Bullet Club and the rise of the Bullet Club to popularity, being the Elite, All In, Ring of Honor, New Japan, and the little company that they created or helped to create, the All Elite Wrestling. Their contributions both inside and outside of the ring are going to be felt for decades. They're so influential on the talents coming up now. Much like I said with New Day, there's going to be kids that get into the wrestling business because Kenny Omega was their favorite wrestler or because the Young Bucks were their favorite tag team. This is the one team on the list which has a chance of winning the Trios tournament. I don't know if you watch this afterwards and Kenny Omega is not even the Young Bucks tag team partner. I'm sorry, I don't have a crystal ball, but I believe that's who's going to be their partner, and I believe that they're going to be the ones that win it. Just another feather in the cap in one of the fantastic trios in the history of wrestling. Our number 5, The Shield. And I know a lot of this is heavy on the last 10-15 years, but trios have become more prominent during that time frame, and it's become more of a jumping off point. You have 3 guys here who the WWE looked at and said, these are the 3 guys who are the future of our company. Ambrose, Rollins, and Reigns. And looking at the success they had in the group and outside of the group, it absolutely was the future of the company. It came in, it would be the equivalent of back in 2002 if Batista, Cena, and Brock Lesnar came in as a group. That is the equivalent of what the Shield did to wrestling. You had 3 guys that were instantly credible, instantly over with the crowds, all became main eventers rather quickly in the run, all with a unique style, all with something different to bring to the table, but it was the next generation of superstars. These were the guys that you knew WWE was looking at to carry the ball, and it can't be stated enough just how far they have taken the ball. Seth Rollins is going to be a WWE Hall of Famer. Roman Reigns, bona fide Hall of Famer. Dean Ambrose, even if he never goes back to WWE and stays in AEW the rest of his career, Dean Ambrose is going to be a WWE Hall of Famer just on what he did with the company. To have that much talent for that amount of time is definitely the reason why there's this high on the list. Now our number 4. This is a group that weren't officially a trio and aren't actually wrestlers. Classy Freddie Blassie, Lou Albano, and the Grand Wizard. And no, if you're too young, we're not talking about that other Grand Wizard that's a bad connotation. This is a different character altogether. In the 70s, in the WWF, these 3 were called the 3 wise men, and basically they were the 3 top heel managers in wrestling. If you had a heel wrestler or a heel tag team, they were managed by one of these three guys, and these guys were the people that would get the wrestlers over. Hulk Hogan was managed by Blassie. Grand Wizard had Superstar Billy Graham. It was freezing my mind. Albano had the Wild Samoans. And all different kinds of people. Albano managed Ivan Koloff at one point. I believe he was the manager of Koloff when Koloff won the WWF title from Bruno back in the early 70s even. And these guys, if you had one of these guys with you, it gave you instant credibility. It made you a big star. Yeah, officially on TV they weren't a trio, but they would deal with each other back and forth. Talent would be traded between them. They had a loose connection with each other. They would help each other at times when it would benefit themselves, like any wrestling heel does. For what they meant in and outside of the WWF's business, that's why they're this high on the list. Now, number 3. The team that's most associated with the 3-man team, the people that made a rule out of it, the fabulous Freebirds. Now, I know the Freebirds, again, much like the Wyatt family, would go on and add members. They would add first, it started off with Buddy Roberts, Michael P.S. Hayes, and Bam Bam Terry Gordy. Later on, Jimmy Garvin would get involved with them. Bill Dundee would get involved with them. Or not Bill Dundee, I'm sorry. Brad Armstrong would get involved with them. Diamond Dallas Page as a manager, Sir Oliver Humperdinck. So there were some other characters that would get in later on. But the original trio of the three members of the Freebirds were so innovative and so important to both what world-class championship wrestling was doing and to wrestling itself. These guys were coming out. It's been said time and time again that they were the first group to use theme music. I know that's been contested. I know they're the first group to really make it popular and to really include the Southern rock style and motif. Basically, when you see the Freebirds, it was like seeing Leonard Skinner in a wrestling ring, or the people that would go to a Leonard Skinner concert. And I know there are some problematic things now, because if you go back, they're draped out in the Confederate flag, which over time has become problematic. I don't ever think they meant it that way. I think it was they're from Georgia. The Confederate flag was part of the Georgia flag at the time. I think it was more of a just to show that they're Southern. A lot of times back in this time, late 70s, early 80s, the symbol of being Southern was the Confederate flag, and it wasn't a racist thing. It was just how you would say, okay, this team is definitely from the South. They innovated everywhere they went. They were also reportedly pains in the ass everywhere they went. They actually had an early effect on the WWF's rock and wrestling. They were in there with David Wolf in the very beginning of it, even though they got fired rather quickly there. Just a fantastic group. Again, probably the most prominent group that people think of when you think of a 3-man team is the Freebirds. Now, coming from that, our number 2, and I know you're going to ask, how do you go from the most prominent team of 3 people? Well, here's one of the most impactful groupings of 3. Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Hulk Hogan, the original 3 members of the NWO. And yes, the NWO grew immensely. At one point, there were probably 40 members in the group. However, that initial 3, these guys coming in and doing what they did for wrestling, do what they did for WCW, they totally changed the game. They made the WWF improve their company to compete with WCW, because what the NWO was doing was so revolutionary. They were breaking down barriers. They were breaking the fourth wall. They were letting the fans in further. They were not treating the fans like the fans were children. They were treating the fans with respect. And that went a lot of way. And it transferred over into ratings. This grouping totally swung the pendulum to WCW. So much so to this day, the NWO haven't teamed in 20 years, and they're still selling NWO merchandise on how impactful they were. That's the impact that they have on wrestling, and they're going to continue to be one of the most impactful groups that ever lived. Whether you consider them a faction, I'm just going off of the first three guys, and I know it would go on and be millions of them in there, but that first three and the impact they made is totally helped to revolutionize wrestling and get it to probably the biggest point it's ever going to be in the late 90s, where you had 10 million people a week watching the show, whether it be WWE or WCW. 10 million people were watching every Monday night. Now, before we get into our number one, we have a little thing here called we call the best of the rest. Basically, things that were thought of for the list but didn't quite make it. First up, Demolition. For the second time, Barry Darsow, a.k.a. Crusher Khrushchev, a.k.a. Smash, has made the list. The three-man team of Demolition was a two-man team for a long while with Axe and Smash. Axe had some health issues, so they brought in Crush to kind of play that Freebird rule where there were three people in the team. They probably would have had a more prominent role on this list if their run could have been a little bit longer, if the Demolition as a team themselves, Axe and Smash, weren't so successful before that bringing in Crush, they'd probably be on the list. Because of that, I did consider them, but they didn't quite make it. Next up, the Triple Threat. Whether it be Shane Douglas, Bam Bam Bigelow, and Chris Candido, or Shane Douglas, Dean Malenko, and Chris Benoit, or Shane Douglas, Chris Candido, and Brian Lee, or even Lance Storm. All the iterations of the Triple Threat were one of the main stables in ECW, one of the highlights of ECW, arguably the best wrestlers in ECW between Shane Douglas, Malenko, Benoit, Candido, highly underrated wrestler, Lance Storm, even Bam Bam Bigelow. Every member of the Triple Threat, even Brian Lee, was a fantastic in-ring wrestler, and their matches on the cards were always some of the better in-ring matches that ECW had. They were always highly thought of, tag team champions, world champions, TV champions. For that reason, the Triple Threat was considered for the list. Now, before we get into our number one, if you think I put something up too high, something down too low, left something off altogether, let me know what you think. Hit me up in the comments. And going to our number one trio in the history of professional wrestling, the Goldust Trio. And you may or may not be familiar with these guys. We're talking about Strangler Lewis, Billy Sandow, and Toots Mondt. And you may have heard their names, but you may not know their impact. Back in the 1920s, almost actually 100 years ago now, professional wrestling was in between an era where it was a total shoot to where they started to work some matches, to where it became more of a show. They still had shoots in there, but this was more, they could give you more excitement. It would be like, imagine now if UFC, if you could say, hey, this heavyweight title match is going to be 5 rounds, wink, wink, and instead of it could be a 10-minute or a 10-second knockout. Kind of the similar thing happened with professional wrestling. They built up characters. They built up how wrestling was promoted. They built up champions, with Strangler Lewis being the main champion. Toots Mondt, also a wrestler, Sandow more of a manager. And yes, Damien Sandow is a homage to Billy Sandow. These three guys and their influence in wrestling is always going to be felt. there is no professional wrestling as you know it without these three. And if you're looking for a better explanation or a more fleshed out version of this, I could take 20 minutes explaining exactly what these guys are and how important they are. But there's another video on YouTube by a YouTube channel called Dave Knows Wrestling. He did a video on the Goldust Trio. I'm going to put the link down here in the description. If you want to learn more about the Goldust Trio and how professional wrestling became professional wrestling that we know it of today, definitely check out his video. It's not a long video. It's concise. He hits all the main points. He gives more information than I'm giving here. But just watch that and you will realize just how important these three guys are to history of pro wrestling. There is no professional wrestling as we know it without these three men. Again, with all that being said, smash that like button, comment, share, subscribe if you haven't. And before I go off the air, I am going to mention, because I mentioned this in all my videos this week, starting this weekend, either Saturday or Sunday, we're going to have a different release schedule for my videos. On Saturday night or Sunday, we're going to release my New Japan Strong review. Reason being, I'm going to try to do it right after it airs every Saturday. However, if something supersedes that, like a wrestling pay-per-view on Saturday night, it'll push that to Sunday. That way, the live television show or the live show is going to take precedence over the taped Strong show. So Strong will be either Saturday or Sunday. Coming from that, It Came From the Network is going to be on Wednesdays. That's where they're going to release every week. Walking in Memphis is going to release every Thursday. And my top 10s are going to release every Friday. The reason for that, I wanted to split up the dates as I do it now. I record my shows on my days off from my normal job. So normally I'll release 2 or 3 shows on one of my days off. Or 2 shows on both of my days off. And I kind of wanted to break it up a little bit more to make it better for you, to make it a little better for me. I think if you get them more staggered throughout the week, it'll give you more time to watch each different one on a different day. Also, for selfish reasons, I think it'll help. It's going to help with the algorithm. It's going to help to get more viewers, more people watching my videos, more subscribers, which ultimately, hopefully leads to being monetized. So I can make improvements to the show, which is ultimately the goal of it. But with that being said, Strong on Saturday and Sunday, It Came From the Network on Wednesday, Walking in Memphis on Thursday, Top 10s on Friday. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, put the number 3 in the comments for me to let me know you made it to the end. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another Heel Heat Top 10.